Picture a room the size of a small church. Now fill it with fire, not one fire. 6 of them, each one big enough to roast an ox whole, each one throwing heat like an open furnace door, each one demanding to be fed with wood every quarter hour, or it sulks and dies and takes your dinner with it. Add the carcasses of 40 sheep hanging from iron hooks. Add 300 chickens in wicker cages, screaming. Add a boy turning a spit so close to the flames that the hair on his arms burned off weeks ago and never grew back. Add the smell of blood and wood smoke and melted fat and crushed pepper and something sweet, something impossibly sweet, cooking in a corner under armed guard. That's the kitchen of a great English castle in the year 1468, 3 days before the biggest wedding this county has seen in living memory. A place where a single sauce might cost more than a farm, where a sculpture made of sugar is watched more carefully than the silver, where you could lose your fingers in the morning and be expected back at your station by noon, because the feast doesn't care about your fingers. Nobody's fingers. The feast is coming like weather, like a flood, like an army, and everyone in this room will either be ready or be destroyed. We're going back there tonight, not as guests sitting at the high table admiring the swans. We're going down the stairs, through the smoke, into the roar. One wedding, one feast, one boy who has to survive the making of it. Everything he would have seen, smelled, carried, burned himself on and eaten when no one was looking. So, I make these history stories, and honestly, I still have no idea whether anyone actually sleeps to them, or whether you're all just lying in the dark listening to descriptions of 15th century meat with your eyes open. Either way, I'm glad you're here. Subscribe if you feel like it. Get comfortable. Here we go. The almonds are rotten. That's the first thing you know about this day, before you know anything else, before you've even properly understood the words. Master Aldous is holding a split sack over the long table, and out of it pours a river of almonds, and the smell that comes off them is wrong. Not the clean, milky, faintly woody smell that almonds are supposed to have. This is damp, sour, the smell of a cellar where something died. Mould has crept through the sack somewhere on the road from London, riding in the dark of a cart for 11 days, feeding and spreading, and now half of them are furred with a bloom of blue-grey dust, and the other half smell like they're thinking about it. 6 sacks, all from the same merchant, all packed in the same warehouse, all, almost certainly, all ruined. You don't understand yet why the room has gone so quiet. You're 14 years old, you've worked in this kitchen since you were 9, and you know almonds are expensive. Everyone knows spices and imported goods are expensive, but you don't yet understand what Master Aldous understands, which is this. Almost every rich dish being served at this wedding, 3 days from now, in front of an earl, a bishop, 2 barons, and roughly 400 guests, is built on almonds. Almond milk for the fish day dishes, almond milk for the blancmange, ground almonds thickening the sauces, almonds in the frumenti for the venison, almonds studding the surface of the great potages like rivets on armour. In a great medieval kitchen, almond milk is what cream and butter are on ordinary days, except it never goes off in the heat. It can be made fresh each morning, and, this is the part that matters, it can be eaten on fast days when the church says no meat, no milk, no eggs. And the second day of this wedding feast falls on a Friday. A Friday. A fish day. A day when 400 people will sit down expecting to be dazzled, and everything that dazzles them must be built by law of God and church without a drop of animal milk in it. Without almonds, there is no Friday. Master Aldous sets the sack down very slowly, the way a man sets down something he would like to throw. He is a wide man, not fat. Wide, built like a door, with forearms scarred pale by 40 years of spitting fat and boiling honey, and a voice that can cut through the roar of 6 fires without ever seeming to rise. Right now he isn't using the voice. He's just looking at the almonds spread across the boards, poking through them with one thick finger, sorting, counting, doing arithmetic in his head that you can almost hear. Then he looks up, and his eyes go around the kitchen, past the master pastry cook, past the sauce cooks, past the boys plucking geese in a storm of feathers by the north door, and they land on you. "What?" he says. "Come here. Your name is Walter. Everyone has called you what since before you can remember. You came to this castle 5 years ago from a village 8 miles away, brought by your uncle, who knew a man, who knew the pantler, who needed a boy small enough to climb inside the great bread oven and scrape it. That was your first job, scraping burnt crust from the inside of a stone oven still warm enough to cook you, on your hands and knees in the dark, breathing flour ash. You did it without crying, or at least without anyone seeing you cry, and so you were kept. Now you're an undercook. The lowest of the undercooks, but an undercook, which means you have a knife of your own, and a station at the end of the third table, and the right to be shouted at by name instead of just boy. In the world of this kitchen, that's a career. You've been promoted twice in 5 years. There are men here who turn spits for a decade. You cross the kitchen. It takes a while. The kitchen of this castle is 60 feet long, stone vaulted with a ceiling that disappears into smoke somewhere above the reach of the light, and this morning it's packed. Every great feast borrows cooks. There are men here from the bishop's household, men from town, a pastry team hired all the way from London, whose master wears a fur-trimmed hood indoors just so nobody forgets what he costs. You slide between them, under a hanging row of copper pans, over a drain channel running pink with the morning's blood, and stop in front of Master Aldous, close enough to smell the sour ruin of the almonds, and under it the smell of the man himself, sweat and smoke and clove, because he chews cloves the way other men chew their nails. You know Simon the grocer, in the town. Yes, master. You've carried messages to him before, a narrow man in a narrow shop that smells like heaven and costs like sin. You will go to him. You will not run, because a boy running through town 3 days before the wedding starts rumours, and rumours raise prices. You will walk fast. You will tell him Master Aldous needs every almond he has, and every almond he can get from anyone he knows, in the town, in the priory, from the ships at the staple if he has to send a rider, and I need them by tomorrow at vespers. Tell him the price is the price. Tell him nothing else. Do not tell him why. Do not tell him how bad it is. If he thinks we're desperate, we're paying double. He leans down. This close his eyes are pale grey, and there is nothing soft in them at all. 400 guests, what? The Earl himself at the high table. If the Friday dinner fails, my lord is shamed in front of the man he most needs to impress in all the world, and someone in this kitchen will carry that shame for the rest of his life. It will not be me. He straightens up. Go. And that's how the biggest 3 days of your life begin. Not with trumpets, with a sack of mouldy nuts, and a walk into town with someone else's disaster balanced on your shoulders. You take the kitchen stairs 2 at a time, out through the yard door, and the cold hits you like a slap. It's late September. Inside the kitchen, it is always summer. Always the hottest day of summer. And your body has forgotten what the actual world feels like. Out here, the air is thin and sharp and smells of horses and rain coming, and your sweat turns to ice on your back before you've crossed the inner ward. The castle is drowning in preparation. You have to press yourself against the wall of the well house to let a cart through, stacked with firewood to the height of a man on horseback, the whole load groaning and shifting on its ropes. Behind it, 2 carters are arguing with the gate porter about a second cart full of sea coal, which the porter says smells like the devil's own privy, and which the carters point out correctly is not their problem. Everywhere there are strangers. Carpenters hammering trestles in the great hall. You can hear them from here. A woodpecker sound bouncing off the walls. Grooms leading strings of horses that belong to nobody anyone knows yet. Guests outriders arriving days early to claim stable space. A man with a lute case on his back is asking anyone who'll stop where the musicians are meant to lodge, and nobody stops. And through all of it, threading between carts and hooves and shouting men, comes the food. You've never seen anything like it, and you grew up watching harvests. A drover is bringing sheep in through the outer gate, and they just keep coming. A grey woolly river with no end, 60, 80, you lose count. Their small feet clattering on the cobbles. Their voices bouncing off the stone like the complaints of the damned. Behind them, penned in the outer ward since yesterday, 6 oxen the size of small buildings stand steaming in the cold, and they will all be dead by tomorrow night, everyone, and you will help make that happen. Crates of chickens stacked into towers, geese in a hissing pen, a cart of rabbits, already dead, already stiff, their fur beaded with dew, barrels and barrels and barrels rolling down ramps, thudding into cellars, wine from Gascony, ale from the castle's own brewhouse working day and night. The Brewster hasn't slept in 2 days and looks like she'd murder a bishop for an hour on a bench. This is what a great wedding is, underneath the silk. It's a siege in reverse. Instead of an army trying to get in, it's food. More food than this castle has ever held, and everyone inside the walls working themselves half to death to receive it, kill it, transform it, and march it up the stairs to the hall in good order. You go out through the gate, past the porter, who knows you, past the beggars who are already gathering 3 days early, because they know what you know, which is that after every great feast comes the almsgiving, the broken meats and unfinished loaves handed out at this very gate, and a wedding like this one might feed the poor of the whole town for a week. An old woman sitting against the gatehouse wall catches your eye and grins at you with 4 teeth. "Good pickings coming, kitchen boy," she says. "Everyone knows what you are. You forget until you leave the castle that you're permanently dusted with flour and smell like a chimney that's been used to smoke bacon. The town is a 15-minute walk downhill, and the whole way you rehearse, every almond he has, by tomorrow at Vespers. The price is the price, say nothing else. You're carrying maybe the most expensive verbal message of your life, and Master Aldous chose you to carry it, and you're not sure yet whether that means he trusts you, or whether it means that if this goes wrong, he wants someone small to blame. Both. It means both. You're learning that about kitchens. Simon the grocer's shop sits on the market street between a cutler and a wax chandler, and you smell it before you see it. Every spice shop smells like this, like a warm wind from a country nobody you know has ever visited. Pepper and ginger and cinnamon bark and something resinous and church-like underneath, because grocers sell incense too. Inside, the shop is dim and narrow and lined floor to ceiling with small locked drawers, like a cabinet built for a giant, and Simon himself stands behind his counter, weighing something on a balance so delicate it trembles when you close the door. He looks up. He is exactly as narrow as his shop, with ink-stained fingers and eyes that do sums. "Castle," he says. It's not a greeting, it's a category. You deliver the message word for word. You watch his face while you do it, and here's the thing. Here's the thing you'll think about later lying on your palate. You said nothing about mould, nothing about ruin, nothing about desperation, exactly as ordered. And it doesn't matter, because Simon the grocer knows the wedding is in 3 days. Simon knows the castle already took delivery of its almonds a week ago, because Simon knows everything that rolls through that gate. And so Simon knows that if Master Aldous is asking for every almond in the county with 3 days to go, something has gone terribly, wonderfully wrong up the hill. The corner of his mouth moves, just a little. A man watching a purse fall open in front of him. "Almonds," he says, "are dear this season." "The price is the price," you say, exactly as instructed, and you hear your own voice come out steadier than you feel. He studies you for a moment. 14 years old, flower in your hair, a burn scar shaped like a fishhook on your right wrist, standing in his shop trying to sound like Master Aldous. And maybe there's a shred of mercy in the man, or maybe he just knows that a castle's business is worth more over 20 years than one squeeze is worth this week, because he nods slowly and pulls a wax tablet toward himself. "I have 2 sacks, Jordan almonds, Valencia, sound and sweet. I opened them myself. The Priory will have some. They buy heavy in autumn for their Lenten stores, and Prior Thomas owes me consideration. And there's a Genoese factor at the staple, with a consignment he's been sitting on, waiting for the price to rise." He looks up. "Well, it has risen. Vespers tomorrow." "By Vespers tomorrow," you repeat. "Tell your master," Simon says, going back to his scales, "that he is a fortunate man, and that fortune is expensive." You walk back up the hill with the deal made, and the whole way you feel it. The strange, buzzing lightness of having been sent to do a thing, and having done it. It won't last. Nothing in a kitchen lasts. But for 15 minutes, going up the hill with the wind at your back and the castle standing grey and enormous against the moving sky, its chimneys already smoking like a town of their own, you are a boy who saved the Friday. Then you walk back into the kitchen, and the heat closes over your head like water, and Master Aldous hears your report, grunts once, and says, "Good. Now get to the scalding trough. We're 400 birds behind, and that's all the triumph you get. That's all the triumph anyone gets down here. The feast eats everything, praise included. Let me tell you about the scalding trough, because if you're going to live these 3 days, you're going to spend a lot of them here. It's a stone trough, long as a coffin and half again as wide, set near the north door where the draught carries the smell away, mostly, and it's kept full of water just below boiling by a boy whose entire job is to ferry pails from the great coppers and pour them in without scalding himself, which he manages perhaps 4 times out of 5. The water steams, the surface is filmed with grease and floating feathers, and beneath the film it is the exact colour you'd imagine. A dead chicken comes to you from the killing yard, still warm, neck limp. You take it by the feet, the legs scaly and cool in your fist, and you plunge it into the water and hold it under. You count. Not too short, or the feathers won't loosen. Not too long. Or the skin cooks and tears, and Master Aldous sees a torn bird go by and asks in that quiet voice, "Who scalded this?" You count to 30 in the old way, the way the last trough boy taught you, one paternoster said fast, and you pull the bird out streaming and the smell hits you, wet feathers and hot skin, a smell like a barnyard drowning, and you'll never fully get it out of your nose, not tonight, not for days. Then you pluck. And here's what nobody tells you about plucking. It's not a delicate job, it's a fast job. Your fingers grab and rip, with the grain of the feathers, fistfuls at a time, the big wing feathers coming out with a sound like tearing canvas, each one leaving a tiny pucker in the pimpled skin. The wet feathers stick to everything. Your hands, your forearms, your face when you wipe the sweat. Within an hour you're tarred and feathered from fingertip to elbow, and your fingertips themselves have gone soft and white and wrinkled from the hot water, and they sting, a low constant sting, because hot wet skin splits at the knuckles, and yours split weeks ago and never get the chance to heal. Bird after bird after bird. Beside you 3 other boys, same work, nobody talking, because talking costs breath, and breath costs speed. The pile of naked chickens grows on the table behind you, pale and pimpled and somehow smaller than they were alive, and a woman from the town, hired for the week, carries them off in 4s to the drawing table where the guts come out. The gut smell drifts over sometimes when the wind through the door shifts. You've long stopped noticing whether it bothers you, and while your hands work, your ears work too, because a kitchen is a place where information falls from above like grease from a spit, and a boy who listens learns. This is what you learn, plucking chickens on the first afternoon. You learn that the wedding is not really about the bride and groom at all. The groom is your lord's eldest son, 19, and by all accounts a decent enough young man who is mostly interested in hawks. The bride is the daughter of a family from 2 counties over, 16 years old, and she arrived yesterday with her mother and a train of 40 horses, and she's been seen exactly once at a window. But the marriage, the real marriage, the one that matters, is between 2 great blocks of land. Her dowry stitches together estates that your lord's family has been circling for 3 generations. The wedding feast is the public seal on that deal, and every dish that goes up those stairs is a sentence in a message written in food, and the message says, "Look what we can command. Look at our reach. Swans from our own river, venison from our own chase, spices from the other side of the world, burned up in a single dinner, because we can." You learn that the Earl is coming. The Earl, the greatest lord of the region, the man your lord bends the knee to, the man whose good opinion is worth more than the whole dowry, and he confirmed only last week, which is why the feast has been growing. It was going to be grand. Now it has to be perfect, because an earl at your table is an audit. Every course will be read like a document. Too mean, and your lord looks poor. Too lavish, and he looks like a man with ambitions above his place, and that's a more dangerous look than poverty. In this particular year, in this particular England, where great men are watching each other very carefully indeed. And the memory of recent wars is not a memory at all, but an open wound, and you learn the numbers. The clerk of the kitchen went past this afternoon with his rolls, reading aloud to the steward, and the numbers fell on the kitchen like snow. 6 oxen, 40 sheep, 3 dozen pigs, 400 chickens, hence your afternoon, 100 geese, swans, 16 of them, taken from the river under the Lord's swan rights, because a swan is not food, a swan is a statement, and no one below a lord may serve one. Herons, bitterns, peacocks 6, and hold that thought. because one of those peacocks is going to matter to you personally in 2 days' time in a way you cannot yet imagine. 12 barrels of eels, a porpoise, an actual porpoise, packed in wet salt on a cart from the coast, because a porpoise counts as a fish for the Friday, the church having ruled in its wisdom that anything living in water is a fish, and there are few things on God's earth that say I am wealthier than you, quite like serving your guests a sea creature the size of a man. 20 pounds of pepper, 14 of ginger, cinnamon, cloves, mace, grains of paradise, saffron. The saffron alone, you hear the clerk say, cost more than the oxen, all 6 oxen. Little red threads, each one the heart of a single crocus flower, picked by hand somewhere in Spain or Essex, and it takes tens of thousands of flowers to make a pound, and the pound is worth more than a plough team, and Master Aldous keeps it locked in the spice chest with 2 keys, one on his belt and one on the clerk's, because saffron is the easiest theft in England. A pinch in the palm is a week's wages, and it doesn't moo on the way out the gate. Your hands keep ripping feathers while your head fills with all of it, and at some point you notice the light through the north door has gone from white to gold to grey, and someone lights the cressets along the walls, and the fires get louder as the dark comes on, the way they always seem to, and still the chickens come. Your shoulders have moved past aching into something quieter and worse, a deep dull burning along the top of the back, and your feet, you've been standing on stone since before dawn, your feet feel like they belong to an old man. Somewhere past Cumplin, the last bird of the day goes to the drawing table, and Master Aldous walks the length of the kitchen looking at everything, touching nothing, and says, "Enough. Eat. Sleep. Tomorrow we kill the oxen and the pastry work begins, and tomorrow night no one sleeps, so sleep now. Supper for the kitchen is pottage, thick peas pottage with bacon boiled through it, eaten standing, out of the same wooden bowl you've eaten from for 5 years, its rim worn silky by your own mouth. It is the best thing you've ever tasted. It is the best thing you've ever tasted every single night. That's the trick hunger plays. And you know it's a trick, and it works anyway. You sleep in the passage between the kitchen and the pastry house, on a straw pallet under your cloak, with the warmth of the banked fires coming through the wall at your back like the flank of some enormous sleeping animal. Around you, the breathing of other boys. Above you faintly through stone music. They're rehearsing in the hall, a shawm, and voices. Your hands sting, your feet throb, your fingers still smell of scald water right through the washing. 3 days. Well, 2 now. You're asleep before you finish the thought. The second day begins in the dark with a hand on your shoulder and the words "oxen boy," and no other explanation, because none is needed. Killing an ox is not like killing a chicken. A chicken is a chore. An ox is an event. It takes 6 men, ropes, a poleaxe, and a kind of grim ceremony, and it happens in the outer yard at first light, so the day's work can start with the blood still hot. You are not one of the 6 men. You're one of the boys who stands ready with buckets, because nothing is wasted, nothing, and the blood itself is wanted for puddings, and it has to be caught as it comes and stirred constantly, stirred with your bare arm to the elbow, or it clots and it's ruined. So you stand in the cold with your bucket, and the ox comes out led on a halter, huge and calm, its breath making clouds, its eye rolling white when it smells the blood of the one that went before, and the men close in, and you look, because looking away is a luxury, and you gave up luxuries at 9 years old. The poleaxe man is a butcher from the town who does this the way Master Aldous chops onions without waste of motion, and it is fast, faster than you ever expect. A single crack and 400 stone of animal goes down like a wall falling, and then you're moving in with your bucket and the heat of it. That's the thing that always shocks you. The tremendous heat coming up off the opened animal into the cold morning. A column of steam rising like the beast's own soul going up, and the smell of iron so thick you can taste it on your teeth. You stir. Your arm goes into the elbow and the blood is hot as bath water, and you stir steady circles, feeling the strands of clot begin to catch on your fingers and pulling them free. And around you the butchers are already at work with an efficiency that would be beautiful if it were anything else, flaying, splitting, the hide peeling back with a sound like a giant undressing, and by the time the sun properly clears the wall, the ox is not an ox anymore. It's beef. Its sides and quarters hanging from a beam. It's a heap of hide worth good money to the tanner. It's fat for the pastry house. It's bones for the stock pots. It's a bucket of blood going stiff-armed and careful back to the kitchen, carried by you, trying not to slop. Your whole right arm painted red-brown and dry and tight, the skin pulling as it dries, like wearing a glove one size too small, 6 times, 6 oxen. By the 3rd, you stop noticing the smell. By the 5th, your arm aches from stirring in a way that's different from every other ache you own. A deep twisting ache right up through the shoulder. By the 6th, the yard runs red into the drain channels, and the dogs of the castle have gathered at the boundary of permitted distance, sitting in a silent, trembling, hopeful row, and the beggars beyond the gate can smell it too, and so can you, and so can the whole town probably. The iron and fat smell of a great house preparing to be generous. And here's something worth understanding lying there in your bed 5.5 centuries later. None of this was hidden. There was no wall between the eating and the killing. The lords upstairs knew exactly where their dinner came from. Many of them had killed deer with their own hands and been blooded on their first hunters' children. And the ceremony of the table, all the carving and presenting you're going to see tomorrow, was built on top of that knowledge, not built to hide it. The distance between the animal and the dish, that's a modern invention. In 1468, dinner had a face, and everyone had seen it. The rest of that second day, you spend in 3 places, and each one teaches you something. First, the pastry house. This is a separate building joined to the kitchen by the passage where you sleep, and it is the empire of the London pastry cook, Master Gervais of the fur-trimmed hood, and it is unlike anywhere else in the castle. The kitchen roars, the pastry house hums, long tables scrubbed white, sacks of flour standing in ranks, and the great oven in the wall, big enough to drive a cart into, which was fired at midnight and will not go cold again until the wedding is over. Pastry in this world is not really food, not the pastry itself. Understand this, and half the medieval table makes sense. A pie crust here is a container. They call it a coffin. That's the actual word, a coffin of paste. And it's made of flour and hot water, and it bakes hard as wood. And inside it goes the actual food, the birds and the marrow and the fruit and the spice, sealed in and cooked in its own little vault. Some coffins get eaten, by the lower tables, by the servants, by the poor at the gate. At the high table you eat what's inside and leave the box, the way you'd leave the barrel after drinking the wine. Your job in the pastry house is hot water and lifting. The paste is worked hot enough that Master Gervais's men hiss through their teeth as they knead, slapping and folding the scalding dough with hands that stopped registering complaint years ago, and you ferry the water and you carry the finished coffins, raised up tall and round like little castle towers, wools thick as your thumb, over to the filling tables. They're surprisingly heavy. Everything in this kitchen is surprisingly heavy. That's the true weight of a feast, not the cost, the actual pounds and hundredweights of it, all of which move through human arms, many of them yours. You watch them build a pie the size of a cartwheel. You genuinely cannot believe it until you see it. A coffin so big that two men raise its walls together working around it like masons, and into it go whole chickens and rabbits and a goose, boned out so they nest inside each other, and eggs and dried fruit black and sweet, and a snowfall of spice. And then the lid goes on, sealed with a rope of dough pinched all the way round by Master Gervais himself, because the seal is everything. A leaking pie is a dead pie, and it takes 4 men with peels to walk it into the oven, everyone shouting quietly at everyone else, if you can imagine shouting done in a whisper. And when the oven door is stopped up after it, there is a moment, one single moment, where the whole pastry house exhales. "That one," says the man next to you, wiping his forehead with the back of a floury wrist, "goes to the high table with trumpets, actual trumpets." He says it the way you'd report a marvel or a crime. Second place, the Spice House. You get sent there mid-afternoon with a message and you stay 11 minutes. And you'll remember it the rest of your life, because the Spice House is the treasure room, more truly than the strong room where the plate is kept, and it smells the way you imagine the floor of heaven smells. The clerk unlocks it. 1 key, then Master Aldis's key, 2 locks, always 2, and inside, in the dim on shelves, in boxes and bladders and stoppered jars, pepper in quantity, actual heaps of it, when most households in England buy pepper by the quarter ounce for Christmas. Ginger roots like little sleeping men, cinnamon in bundles, cloves, nails of clove, whole boxes, each one grown on an island so far away that no man in this castle could point toward it, not even wrongly. And the saffron, in its own small chest within the chest, wrapped in parchment, and the clerk weighs out what the sauces need on a balance, while Master Aldous watches the weighing, and the sauce cook watches Master Aldous. 3 men in a stone closet supervising each other over a substance worth more than all 3 of their yearly wages together. And nobody finds this strange, because it isn't strange. It's just what value looks like when it's small enough to fit in a sleeve. Third place, as the light dies, the fish house, because tomorrow, remember, the day after the wedding day itself, is Friday. The eels arrive from the stew ponds in barrels, alive, and an eel does not agree to become dinner. You spend the last hour of daylight with your sleeves rolled, hunting eels through cold water with both hands, and an eel is a muscle-wearing slime. It pours through your grip like the water itself decided to fight you, and the fish cook, a silent Yorkshireman with hands like oak roots, shows you the trick, sacking cloth, grip with cloth, and even then you lose one over the side of the barrel and it goes down the drain channel like dark lightning, and 3 boys chase it the length of the kitchen while the whole room for the first time in 2 days laughs. Even Master Aldous, you see it. 1 short exhalation through the nose, gone in a second. Then the almonds arrive, at vespers, exactly as promised, on Simon the grocer's own cart. 5 good sacks, opened and inspected in the yard by torchlight. Master Aldous plunging his arm into the shoulder and pulling out handfuls from the deep middle, sniffing, biting, chewing, staring at nothing while he chews the way men do when their whole attention has gone down into their mouth. A long moment. "Sound," he says at last, and the word goes around the kitchen like a bell being rung. Sound, sound. The almonds are sound, and men who didn't even know they were holding their breath go back to work, breathing. The Friday is saved. You saved it. A little. A very little. And nobody says so. And standing there in the torch-lit yard with eel slime drying on your forearms and ox blood still rimmed under your fingernails, you find you don't mind. There's a feeling, low down, that you're starting to recognize, and it isn't pride exactly. It's the feeling of being a stone in an arch. Nobody praises a stone, but take it out, and everything falls. Tomorrow, the wedding. Tonight, Master Aldous was true to his word. Nobody sleeps. The night before, a great feast has its own weather. The kitchen after midnight is a different country. The daytime crowd thins to the core. The men who matter and the fires are built up rather than banked, and everything happens in a light that swims. Orange below, black above. Faces appearing out of the dark and vanishing back into it, and the noise changes too. The shouting stops, and what's left is the sound of the work itself, the ceaseless wet chopping, the scrape of ladles on copper, the fires breathing, the creak of the spit chains, and under all of it, all night, a low mutter of men counting dishes, counting hours, counting the steps between here and disaster. Your night is sauces and spits. The sauces first, because a medieval feast is, more than anything else, a parade of sauces. The meat is the occasion, the sauce is the art. And every sauce is built by hand, which means built by mortar. And the mortars here are stone bowls the size of church fonts, and the pestles are clubs, and the boys who work them are chosen for shoulders, and tonight one of those boys is you. You pound. That's the whole job, and it's endless. Bread crusts toasted brown, into the mortar, pound to crumbs, the pestle jumping in your grip, each impact travelling up through your wrist, your elbow, your burning shoulder, and into your back teeth. Almonds, the blessed rescued almonds, blanched slick in hot water so the brown skins slip off between finger and thumb. 1,000 small slippery pinches, and then into the mortar and pound, pound, pound until they break, then crumble, then turn to a pale, oily sand. Then, if you keep on past the point where your arm is begging, into an actual paste, sweet-smelling, sticking to the pestle in clots. Ginger, which fights back, fibrous and knotty. Pepper, which gets into the air, into your nose, into the split skin of your knuckles where it burns like a small personal insult, and everyone around a pepper mortar weeps and sneezes and nobody comments because everyone has done it. The sauce cook works down the line of mortars like a physician doing rounds. A pinch of this mortar rubbed between his fingers, a taste from that one on the end of a wooden spoon that never touches the pot twice without wiping. He is building the classics, the sauces every noble guest will know and judge. Cameline sauce, cinnamon brown, sharp with vinegar for the roasted meats. Green sauce, pounded parsley and sage and vinegar, bright as June grass for the fish. Pepper sauce, black and hot for the venison. And gingered galantine dark as leather for the eels. There are no recipes anywhere. There is no paper in this kitchen except the clerk's accounts. It is all in his head and his hands, quantities held as feel and smell. 30 years of feast stored in the body of one mortal man, and when he dies, whatever he never managed to shout into an apprentice dies with him. That's what a medieval recipe is. Not a document, a person. Sometime deep in the night, they start the show dishes, and you get pulled off the mortars to help, and this is where you finally see, up close, the strange glittering theatre that the guests will actually remember. Blancmange first. the dish of dishes served at every great feast in Christendom, and it is nothing like what will one day wear its name. Capon flesh, the whitest meat of the whitest birds, pounded, and you know exactly what pounded means now, your arms know, pounded to silk, then cooked down slow with rice and almond milk and sugar into something between a porridge and a cloud. Pure white, and whiteness is the whole point. Whiteness is expensive. Whiteness means refined sugar and skinned almonds and pale meat and endless labour, and it goes into dishes smoothed like snow. And then, and this is the part that makes you stop and stare, they decorate it with real gold. Gold leaf, thinner than a moth's wing, lifted on a dry knife blade, laid trembling onto the white, and there it sits. Food, wearing money. Beside it a serving gilded, not with gold, but with a paste of egg yolks and saffron, indoored, they call it, painted with a feather and set near the fire to gleam, so that even the dishes that don't wear metal look like they've been dipped in sunset. And then, near dawn, the peacocks. You've been hearing about the peacocks for 2 days. Now you watch the second cook do the thing, and it's less like cooking than like a very careful murder followed by a resurrection. The bird is skinned, whole, feathers and all, the skin peeled back from the flesh, with little strokes of a knife thin as a reed, cape and train, and shimmering neck. The whole glory of the animal set aside like a costume on a hook. The naked bird is roasted, and then, when it's cooked and cooled just enough, it's dressed again, sewn back into its own feathers, propped and wired into a living posture, the tail spread in a fan of green gold eyes, the head raised, and the beak. And I want you to know, this is real. This is documented. This happened at feasts across Europe. The beak is stuffed with a scrap of wool soaked in spirits, so that at the moment of serving it can be lit. And the peacock enters the hall breathing fire. A dead bird, dressed as a living one, breathing fire, carried shoulder high to a table of the most powerful people in the county, while trumpets play. That's dinner. That's what dinner is, at the top of this world. Not nourishment. Theatre. A dream you can eat. "Don't gawp, boy," says the second cook, not unkindly, threading a wire down a peacock's neck, "and say your prayers tonight, because you're on the serving stair tomorrow." You go still. The stair? Hall's short of hands. Steward's taken half the strong boys for the carrying, and Master Aldous put your name up. He glances at you over the ruined, glorious bird. You walk steady. You don't drop. You don't stare at the great folk. And above everything, above your own soul, boy, you do not stop moving on the stair. Dishes go up, empties come down, and a boy who stops on that stair is a dam in a river in flood. A pause. It's an honour, if you live. He grins. You can't tell how much of it is a joke. That's going to be a theme. The last hours before dawn blur. Somewhere in them, you stand at a fire turning a spit for a solid hour, because the spit boy fainted, actually fainted, folded up sideways like an empty sack, and was carried into the yard air and slapped awake and given ale. And while he was gone, you took the handle, and let me tell you what an hour on the spit is. The fire is an arm's length away, and it is roasting an ox quarter, which means it is high and deep, and it reaches for you. The heat presses on the side of your face like a hand. Your one side scorches while your other side stands in the doordraft and chills. Half of you summer, half of you winter, and the handle needs turning slow and even. Always even, because even is what stops the meat charring on one face and bleeding on the other, and the fat drips and hits the fire and flares. Spit, flare, hypnotic, and the dripping pans beneath fill with a liquid gold that the pastry house will fight over, and your arm goes from tired to numb to a kind of distant burning that no longer feels entirely attached to you, and you turn and turn and turn, and the meat browns like a slow sunrise, and somewhere behind you the kitchen roars on, and you understand in your bones now, and not just your ears, why the spit boys are the ones who fall asleep at supper with food still in their mouths. Dawn comes grey through the north door, the wedding day. Bells begin somewhere above, the chapel first, then the town below answering, and Master Aldous walks the length of the kitchen one more time, looking at the ranked coffins, the saucepots sealed and waiting, the peacocks standing in their feathered lie, the whole arsenal of it, and he doesn't smile. He never smiles, but he stops in the middle of the room and says loudly enough for everyone, "They will remember this dinner in this county for 50 years. See to it that what they remember is glory. Wash your hands, all of you, twice." And then quieter, almost to himself, but you're near enough to hear it. "And God keep every hand steady on the stair." You look down at your own hands, split knuckles, fishhook scar, pepper burn, nails still shadowed at the rim with ox blood no scrubbing will shift. In 4 hours, these hands will carry food to the greatest table you will ever stand beside. You wash them twice. Then a third time. It doesn't help the shaking, but you do it anyway. The wedding itself, the actual sacrament, happens at the church door in the late morning, and you don't see it. Almost nobody in this castle sees it. That's worth sitting with for a moment. The event this entire storm is named for takes perhaps half an hour. A young man and a younger woman standing at the door of the chapel, because marriages are made at the door in public before witnesses. That's the law and the custom. Vows exchanged, a ring, a blessing, a mass inside afterward for those grand enough to fit. Half an hour. And the feast that celebrates it will run for 2 days, consume the wealth of a village, and be talked about for a generation. The proportion tells you everything. In this world, the wedding is the deed. The feast is the proclamation. A marriage between great families that wasn't seen to be celebrated, magnificently, publicly, wastefully, might as well not have happened. What you know of the ceremony is the sound of it. Coming down the stairs and through the walls into the kitchen, the chapel bell, then singing, thin and high and far away, and then a great gust of human noise, cheering as the couple turns to face the crowd in the ward. And at that exact moment Master Aldous claps his hands once, a single flat crack like a green log splitting, and says, "Now," and the kitchen goes to war. I want to walk you through what happens next slowly, because this right here, the 2 hours around the first course of a great medieval feast, is one of the most precisely choreographed things in the entire medieval world, and almost nobody thinks about it. We remember the knights. We remember the cathedrals. Nobody remembers the logistics of hot food for 400 people moving up a spiral stair, and it deserves remembering, because it was a masterpiece performed twice a day by people whose names nobody wrote down. Start with the problem. The hall is up there, the kitchen is down here, and not just down, away, separated on purpose, by a passage and a stair, because kitchens burn. Kitchens have always burned, and a lord would rather his dinner arrive cool than his castle arrive on fire. Between the two runs the artery, the passage, the stair, the screens at the hall's low end, the screen's passage, where everything and everyone entering the hall is marshalled. Food must move along this artery in course, order, in rank order, hot where hot matters, upright where upright matters, at the pace the hall dictates and not the pace the kitchen would like. and it must do this through a space where two boys with chargers can barely pass each other. The solution is the thing you become part of at noon on the wedding day. The chain. You stand on the stair, third from the bottom, in a clean tabard they gave you that smells of the chest it was stored in, lavender and dust, and your job is 11 steps of spiral stone. The boy below hands up to you. You climb your 11 steps. You hand to the boy above. You come down. It has begun again before you reach the bottom. That's all. That's everything. Dishes go up the outer side of the spiral where the steps are wide. Empties come down the inner side where they're narrow. You keep to your side as you were told 9 times, and you do not stop. And the dishes start coming. First the bread and the wine went up long ago, and the salt, the great silver salt cellar shaped like a ship that marks the high table, like a crown marks a head, and all the trestles are laid, and the trumpets, you can hear them even in the stairwell, actual trumpets calling the hall to wash, because everyone washes before meat, ewers and basins and towels moving down the tables in strict order of rank, and rank is the grammar of everything up there. Who sits above the salt and who below it? Who shares a mess? Because most guests eat in messes, pairs or fours sharing dishes between them. And who is served first, and who gets the sauce fresh, and who gets it after 40 other spoons. Then the first course, and the first course of a feast like this is not a dish. It's a procession. It's a dozen dishes staged in the screen's passage, and it enters the hall behind the steward with his staff, in order to music, and what your hands touch on the stair, in that half hour you will remember in your palms for the rest of your life. A charger of brawn with mustard, the winter classic, heavy as a paving stone, the pewter cold on the underside and the meat radiating warmth up through it. Frumenti, hulled wheat swollen in broth and almond milk, golden with saffron, in deep dishes that slop if you tilt them 1 degree and you don't tilt them. The venison to go with it, dark as peat. A pottage they call brouet, thick, spiced, its surface trembling with the rhythm of your steps like a small anxious lake. Chickens endured, gleaming that saffron gold stacked like treasure. A dish of small birds, larks, a whole flock of larks on one charger, each one 2 bites, and the charger of them lighter than it looks, which nearly undoes you, 'cause your arms braced for weight that wasn't there, and the whole thing leaps upward an inch and your heart goes out through the top of your head, and the boy above you says, calm as stone, steady, and takes it, and the chain doesn't even pause. That's the stair. 11 steps, 40 times, 80 times. Your world narrows to the wedge of stone in front of you, the weight in your hands, the heat coming through pewter into your split knuckles, sweat running down inside the clean tabard, the boy above, the boy below, the smell of every dish arriving before it like an announcement, roast fat, saffron, cinnamon, vinegar, sharp sauces, and rising past all of it from the hall above, a sound you've never heard from underneath before. 400 people at table. It doesn't sound like eating, it sounds like the sea. Twice things enter the chain that stop your breath. The first is the pie, the cartwheel pie, the one that took 4 men and an oven door, and it does not go up the stair, it can't, it goes up the other way, the long way, through the yard on a board carried by 4 men walking in step like they're bearing a bier, with the steward ahead of them, and as it passes the stair door you get one glimpse of it, glazed brown and huge and steaming faintly at its pinched seam, and every boy on the stair turns his head just for a second, one allowed second. The second is the swan. They bring it past to stage it for the second course, and it has been done like the peacocks, skinned and roasted and redressed. riding a pastry lake painted green, its neck held curved on a hidden iron, wings half lifted, and it is wearing a little gilded crown, and it looks, there's no other word, it looks alive. It looks like it will hiss. A boy coming down the stair with a stack of empties flattens himself against the wall to let it pass and crosses himself. And honestly, fair enough. And here is the strangest thing about the whole strange hour, the thing you only understand much later. All of it, the chain, the sweat, the shaking arms, the choreography sharp enough to shave with, all of it exists to be invisible. Upstairs, the dream is the dishes simply appear, that a swan wearing a crown simply arrives, floating on trumpet music. No guest at that feast will ever think about the stair. The whole art of the service is that the labour vanishes into the spectacle, like the wire vanishes into the swan's neck, and you are the wire, you and 40 others, and the better you do your work, the less you exist. You are not allowed to be seen doing the work that made the glory possible. That was the point of you. Somewhere in the middle of the first course, the boy 2 above you misses his footing coming down, empty-handed, thank God, empty-handed, and goes down 4 steps on his back with a sound like a barrel falling, and is hauled up by the collar, white-faced, and asked one question only, whole, and nods, and is put back in the chain, and the chain closes over the event like water over a stone. 50 years from now, that boy will still dream about those 4 steps. The feast will not remember them at all. The feast doesn't remember anything. The feast only wants, and it's about to want the thing you've been dreading since dawn. Because between the first course and the second comes the subtlety. And Master Aldous has decided, for reasons known only to God and himself, that when the subtlety goes up, you go with it. Let me tell you what a subtlety is, because it may be the most medieval thing in this entire story, and this is a story containing a fire-breathing peacock. A subtlety, is a sculpture served between the courses of a feast. Sometimes it's made of sugar, sometimes of marzipan, almond paste and sugar work like clay, sometimes of pastry and wax and wire and paint all together, and it is carried in with ceremony and paraded before the high table. And here is the crucial part. Mostly you don't eat it. It's a message. It's the host speaking to his guests in the language of astonishing objects. At royal feasts, subtleties took the shape of saints, castles, ships in full sail, eagles, allegories with little written scrolls coming out of their mouths like the speech bubbles they in fact were. At the crowning feast of a boy king earlier in this very century, the subtleties were pointed political statements about his right to 2 thrones, in sugar, dessert as diplomacy, confectionery with a foreign policy. For this wedding, the subtlety of the second course has been building in the cool room off the pastry house for a week, under linen, under guard, and you saw it for the first time this morning, and it stopped you like a hand on the chest. It is the 2 castles, his family's castle and hers, each one worked in sugar paste and marzipan, towers, gates, little battlements you could cut your finger on, and between them a bridge, and on the bridge 2 small figures with their hands joined, gilded, and beneath the bridge a river of blue-green sugar running the length of the board, and in the river swans. Sugar swans small as thumbs, 7 of them. The whole thing is the length of a man lying down, and it stands on a single great board, and it says, to anyone at that high table with eyes, exactly what it means to say, 2 houses, joined, a bridge built, wealth beyond counting on both banks of the river. The London men made it. Master Gervaise slept beside it for 3 nights, actually slept beside it, on a pallet, like a groom with a sick horse, and it goes up between the courses, carried flat and level and slow by 6 bearers, 5 of Master Gervais's own men. And you? Why you? You asked. Or rather, you stood there this morning while it was announced and your face asked for you, and Master Aldous answered the face. Because you're the right height for the 6th corner, you walk steady, and you did the almonds without making noise about it. That was the whole speech. In 5 years it is the longest praise he has ever given you, and it is also a sentence because now you have to do it. The moment comes in the pause after the first course, when the hall above has been cleared and voided, the minstrels are playing, and the second course is staged and steaming in the screen's passage. The Sutelti has walked from the cool room through the yard, the long level way, the pies way, under a linen tent held over it by 2 more men in case of God forbid a bird, and at the door to the screen's passage the linen comes off, and Master Gervais looks at his creation for a long moment the way a man looks at his child going to war, and takes his corner, front right. You have rear left. The board's edge settles onto your 2 hands, and you are braced for the weight this time. You learned that on the stair. But it's not the weight that gets you, it's the aliveness of it. 6 men's smallest movements all meet in this one board. Every heartbeat, every breath, every half step, all of it travelling through the wood into your palms, and the sugar river shivers with all of it, and the little swans tremble on their sugar water as if a wind was crossing it. Level is everything, Master Gervais says quietly, eyes forward. Not fast, not slow. Level. If it leans, the bridge cracks. If the bridge cracks. And he doesn't finish, and it's worse that he doesn't finish. The steward's staff knocks the floor. The trumpets stand up, and the doors of the great hall open in front of you. Heat and light and noise, that's the first second. A wall of it. The hall of this castle at feast is nothing like the hall of this castle on any other day. Hundreds of candles and torches, wax, real wax, another small fortune burning quietly on the walls, and the hearths going, and the body heat of 400 people in wool and fur, and overhead the banners hanging in the smoke haze, and underfoot fresh rushes and strewing herbs, so that every footstep releases a ghost of meadow into all that fire and meat. The trumpets sound, and it's not like hearing trumpets from the stairwell. It goes through your sternum, and the whole enormous room turns its heads toward you, toward the thing in your hands. You do what you were told 9 times not to do. Of course you do. You're 14. You look up. 1 glance, half a second down the length of the hall, and half a second is enough, because the image goes in like a nail and never comes out. The 2 long tables running the length of the hall, faces and faces and faces, hands stilled over trenchers. The high table crossways on its dais at the far end, under a canopy of red and gold, the bride in the centre in blue, small, straight-backed 16, her face doing the work of a lifetime, staying serene. Beside her the groom, and to their right a big man in dark velvet with a chain across his shoulders that catches every candle in the room at once, and you don't need anyone to tell you that this is the Earl, because power turns out to be a thing you can see at 40 paces. It sits on some men like weather. Eyes down, murmurs the bearer beside you without moving his lips, and your eyes go down, and now the world is the board, and the walk begins. The length of a great hall is perhaps 25 paces. Those are the longest 25 paces of your life so far, and here's what they contain. The grain of the board's edge printing itself into your fingers, your own pulse, visible, actually visible, in the tremble of the sugar river. The rushes dragging softly at your feet, each step place toe first the way Gervaise's men do it, feeling the floor before trusting it. The minstrels playing something high and sweet that you will never be able to remember and never entirely forget. A wave moving up the hall alongside you at the pace you walk, and the wave is made of human breath. Oh, and ah, and lords, look at it. And somewhere, a woman laughing with pure delight, and the strangest thing, the thing you'll think about on your pallet tonight, is that they're not making that sound at 6 sweating bearers. They can't even see you. You have already vanished. There is a sugar bridge floating up the hall of its own accord, and 2 gilded figures joining hands upon it, and that is all that is happening in the whole world for everyone in this room except 6 men and the sugar itself. Halfway, a guest stands up at the side table to see better, too fast, and his bench shoves back and catches the man beside him, and there's a jostle, a lurch of bodies, one arm flung out for balance no more than a foot from the board's edge, and 6 men make the same sound. A single sharp intake through the nose, and Jervis says, "Hold," and the board stops dead, level, level, the river swinging once, the swans nodding on their sugar water, the bridge, you are watching the bridge the way a mother watches a fevered child, and the bridge holds. The guest is pulled down by his neighbours. Somebody laughs. The walk resumes. And then you're at the dais, and the board goes onto the trestle set before the high table, smooth as a boat coming to a dock. And it's done, it's landed, and the hall stands up. All of it. 400 people getting to their feet with a sound like a wave breaking, to look at a sugar bridge, and over the top of the noise the Earl leans toward your lord, and you're near enough for 2 more seconds, you're near enough, and you hear it with your own ears, the sentence that repays 6 oxen, a porpoise, a pound of saffron, and 100 aching hands. My lord, I have not seen its like south of York. That's it. That's the whole treasure. 8 words from the right mouth. Your lord's face does something very small and very controlled, and you understand, even at 14, that you have just watched him receive the true wedding gift. Then a hand has your shoulder, turning you, and you're walking back down the hall, invisible again, 6 paces behind Gervaise's men, past the faces already turning back to their wine, and through the screens, and down the stair, back into the raw and the orange dark and the smell of the second course going up past you dish by dish. And Master Aldous is standing at the bottom of the stair, and he looks at you for a moment and says, "Well, you didn't drop it. Highest praise. You'll take it. You'll take it to your grave, honestly." The second course goes up while your heart is still coming down, and since your hands are needed on the stair again, but your head is still up in that hall, let me keep it there a little longer and tell you what dinner actually looks like from above, at the top of this world, because it is stranger and more beautiful and more rigid than almost anything else the Middle Ages made. Start with the bread, because at the high table the bread is the plate, a trencher, a thick slice cut from a loaf baked days ago on purpose, stale enough to be firm, squared off by the pantler with a ceremony of its own, and your meat and your sauce are laid upon it, and it drinks the juices all through dinner, and at the end you do not eat it, not if you're anybody. The used trenchers, heavy and soaked with the gravy of a dozen dishes, go into the alms baskets, and tomorrow the poor at the gate will eat the bread that spent today being a rich man's plate. Nothing in this world is wasted, but more than that, the waste is the charity. The system is designed so that magnificence drips downward, plate by soaked plate. Whether that's beautiful or terrible is a question you can hold on to as you drift off. It's both. Most true things about this world are both. There are no forks. I know you've heard that before, but sit with what it means at a feast. Everything that reaches a noble mouth gets there by knife, by spoon, or by fingers, and therefore the manners of the hall are almost entirely about hands. You take your meat with 3 fingers, not 5. You do not plunge your hand into the shared dish past the knuckle. You do not return a bitten morsel to the mess you share with your neighbour. You wipe your fingers on the napkin, never the cloth. Never, God preserve you, on the dog. There are whole books teaching boys these laws, and noble children learn them the way you learned the scalding count, because at this table, eating is being watched. Every mouthful is testimony about your breeding. A feast at the high table is the least relaxing meal in England, and the bride, 16 in blue, at the centre of 400 pairs of eyes, is eating almost nothing at her own wedding. And every woman in that hall knows exactly why, and so does she. And the carving alone. At the high table, meat is not served, it is performed. The carver is a gentleman, often a young man of good family, because carving before a lord is an honourable office, a rung on the ladder of service that runs through every great house, and he works standing with a knife whose keenness is his personal religion, and the vocabulary. Oh, you'd love the vocabulary. He doesn't just carve everything. He breaks a deer, he lifts a swan, he spoils a hen, unbraces a duck, disfigures a peacock, unlaces a rabbit. Every beast has its own verb and its own correct dismantling, and doing it wrongly before an earl would be a small, quiet catastrophe for a young man's prospects. Food at this level is a language, and everyone at the high table is fluent, and the entire hall is one long conversation conducted in courses, in gilding, in the order of who gets served when, in which dish pauses before whom. Which brings us to the cupbearer and the shadow at every great feast. Before the wine touches your lord's cup, before certain dishes pass to the grate, there's a small gesture you'd miss if you weren't watching for it. The assay. A morsel touched, a sip taken, by a designated officer in full view. The taste for poison. Now, in truth, at a wedding like this one, nobody expects poison. Poisoning at table is far rarer in the real Middle Ages than in the stories, but the assay isn't really about chemistry. It's about trust made visible. It says, "This house stakes a servant's body on the goodness of what it serves you." It's a bow performed with someone's mouth. The Earl watches it done and nods and drinks. The whole exchange takes 4 seconds and has 1,000 years of murdered kings behind it. Meanwhile, the second course is thundering up your stair. The swan in its crown, riding its green pastry lake to the high table only, because swan is rank-made meat. The peacocks, and yes, the beak flame. You hear it happen. You're 8 steps down inside a stone spiral and you still hear the hall react. A gasp and then a roar of delight, like a crowd at a bear baiting but gladder. The porpoise is being saved for tomorrow, but there are herons up there, and bitterns, and a dish of lampreys in galantine that a duke once allegedly died of eating too many of, and cranes, whole roasted cranes, which every cookbook of the age agrees are barely worth eating, and every great feast serves anyway, because the point of a crane is not the flavour of the crane. The point of a crane is that you had a crane. And below stairs, while the hall dreams, the kitchen is fighting for its life. And this is the hour, right here, mid-second course, when it nearly all goes wrong. It goes wrong the way it always goes wrong in kitchens, which is to say instantly and stupidly. A dripping pan under the largest fire, brimming with an entire afternoon of ox fat, and a green log spitting, and a coal the size of a thumbnail arcing out, and the pan doesn't catch politely. Fat fire never does. There's a sound like a great soft cough, woomph, and a sheet of flame stands up out of the pan taller than a man. Instantly, orange, white and filthy with black smoke, and it licks the underside of the mantle and reaches sideways for the wooden spit rack, and for 1 full second, 1 second you will remember in your body forever, 60 people in a stone room all understand at the same time that they are standing inside the thing every castle fears more than any army. Then the second, and the kitchen does what the kitchen is. No screaming. Screaming is for people with time. The fire boy is already dragging the spit clear with his bare hands on the hot iron. You hear him do it. You hear the hiss, and he doesn't stop. Master Aldous crosses the room in 4 strides, and he does not throw water. Water on a fat fire is how you burn a castle down. Water turns burning fat into burning rain. Every soul in this room drank that lesson with their first kitchen milk. He takes the great damping board off the wall where it has hung your whole 5 years, unused, waiting for exactly this, and slams it flat over the pan like closing a book on an argument, and leans on it, and a boy is already there with wet sacking for the edges, and another is shoveling salt from the salt tub onto the spatter fires where the flare spat fat across the hearthstone, salt in fistfuls smothering the little burning islands one by one, and the black smoke rolls up into the vault and hangs there stinking, and the flame is gone. 12 seconds, maybe 15, from cough to quiet. The kitchen exhales. Someone laughs. 1 high, wild bark. The sound of a man's fear leaving his body without permission. The fire boy is standing there looking at his palms with an expression of mild academic interest which is shock, and he's taken away to the trough to hold his hands in cold water, where he will stand for an hour and be back at his fire tomorrow, because that is the truth of this place and there's no dressing it up. The feast does not stop. Above your heads 400 people are watching a swan wear a crown. Not one of them will ever know that 20 feet beneath their shoes, for 12 seconds, the wedding nearly became the story of the year for a very different reason. The dishes never even paused on the stair. You know, because you were on it, with a charger of gilded chickens in your hands, and when the wumph came, you did the arithmetic every servant learns to do, and the arithmetic said keep walking, dishes up, empties down. The stair forgives nothing, and the hall knows nothing, and the fat fire is already becoming a story the men will tell tonight with widening hands. That's the kitchen. Glory upstairs, 12 seconds from ruin downstairs, and the only monument to the difference is a scorched board hung back on its nail, and a boy with bandaged hands eating his supper that night to a hero's portion. Double bacon in his pottage, ladled out by Master Aldous personally, in total silence, which everyone present understands perfectly. Between the second course and the third, you're pulled off the stair and sent up, into the hall itself, because the voiding of a course, the clearing, needs hands, and the hall is drinking faster than the ushers can cope, and so for a quarter of an hour, 1 single quarter of an hour, you are inside the dream you've been feeding for 2 days. Nobody warns you what it does to you standing in it. From the stair, the hall was a sound. From the floor, it's an ocean you're wading in. The heat first, thick, animal, wine-sweet, nothing like the kitchen's clean furnace heat. This is the heat of 400 bodies and 1,000 candles, and it has a smell that will come back to you at odd moments all your life. Wax and wine and rose water and fir and crushed herbs underfoot and under all of it. Meat, the whole day's meat, risen into the air and living in the roof with the banners. The noise is not one noise. Walk 10 feet and you pass through 6 of them. A knight telling a hunting story with his hands, 2 old men arguing genealogy across a dish of larks, a burst of women's laughter bright as breaking glass, a man singing quietly to himself in French, the minstrels soaring away up in their gallery, and below everything, the ground note, the clink and scrape and slosh of the largest meal you will ever see with your own eyes. Your job is empties. You move down the side table with a basket, taking what the ushers hand you. And this close, this is what nobody tells you about a great feast. This close, it's not grand at all, it's human. Gloriously, catastrophically human. A lord in velvet worth a plough team has cameline sauce in his beard and is beyond caring. 2 guests are asleep, upright, with the mysterious dignity of the very drunk. A lady is discreetly feeding a whole gilded chicken wing to a greyhound under the table, which is against every courtesy book ever written, and the greyhound's eyes are closed in bliss, and the lady's face says the courtesy books can go and argue with the dog. Wine has gone into the rushes in a dozen places, and the smell of it rises where you step, sharp and grapey. A boy your own age in the livery of some visiting house catches your eye across the wreckage of a side table, and gives you the smallest, most complete look of shared understanding in the history of the world. And then you're near the dais, filling your basket, and you see it. The bride's trencher. Everyone else's trencher is soaked dark, layered, worked over, a day's magnificence recorded in gravy like rings in a tree. Hers is almost clean, a corner of it darkened, a few careful marks. The record of a girl who has sat for 5 hours at the centre of the greatest meal her world can produce, being looked at by everyone, and has managed perhaps 10 mouthfuls. She's still sitting there now, upright in the blue gown, smiling at something the Earl's lady is saying, doing it beautifully and just for a second, because you're 14 and invisible, and nobody has ever once told you not to feel things. Your heart goes out of you and across the dais to her. 16 and hungry at her own wedding feast, and you think with sudden, violent kitchen loyalty that somebody ought to bring her a fritter at midnight when all these people are finally gone. Somebody probably will. Her own people, her nurse, whoever came with those 40 horses. You hope so. You'll never find out, and you will wonder, at strange moments, for 60 years. Her trencher will go in the alms basket like all the rest. Tomorrow one of the poor at the gate will eat the wedding bread of a bride who couldn't. There's a sermon in that somewhere. The almoner could probably find it. You just put it in the basket gently, for no reason you could explain, gently, and move on down the table. At the end of your quarter hour, the usher jerks his chin at the screens. Done, back down, and you go. Past the trumpeters resting their lips and drinking ale in the passage like labourers, which is what they are. Past a juggler waiting to go on, throwing one quiet loop of 3 balls to keep his hands warm, down the stair, and the cool of the stairwell closes over you, and the hall becomes a sound again. But you carry it down with you the whole quarter hour, and when the trough boy asks what it's like up there, you consider the sauce in the beard, and the greyhound, and the sleeping men, and the girl in blue who isn't eating, and the roof full of smoke and music, and you give him the only honest summary there is. Loud, you say, and they're leaving half the larks. His eyes go round with pure moral outrage, and that right there is the truest review of a medieval feast ever delivered. downstairs, judging upstairs by what it wastes, since the beginning of tables, world without end. The third course goes up as the afternoon light in the yard turns amber, and the third course of a medieval feast is where dinner finally admits it's sweet. Not that sweetness waited its turn until now. That's another thing worth unlearning while you drift. This age does not divide savoury from sweet the way yours does. Sugar and cinnamon have been in the meat sauces all day. Dried fruit has been sitting inside chickens since the first course. The whole palette of a great medieval table lives in the borderland your world reserves for 1 or 2 holiday dishes, sweet sharp, spiced rich, vinegar against honey, and the third course simply leans further in. Up the stair now go the fritters, and the smell of them in the stairwell is enough to make your empty stomach cramp. Apples and batter and hot fat and sugar. Wafers, thin as leaves, pressed between long-handled irons that stamp them with patterns carried up in stacked towers. Pears in spiced wine syrup, whole, standing upright in their dishes like little monks, dyed crimson, glistening. Custard tarts coloured gold with saffron, and some of them checkered gold and blood red and even green, because colour is flavour here. Colour is half the point. A table at this level is dressed like a manuscript page. Candied ginger, candied orange peel come all the way from the Mediterranean as peel and transformed in this castle's own sugar pans. And comfits, seeds of anise and coriander rolled in hardened sugar coat by coat over days. Little pearls of sweetness that will be scattered and served at the very end with the hippocras, the spiced sweet wine. And here's a detail to fall asleep on. That final serving of spices and sweet wine at the end of the feast was called the voidy, the voiding, the emptying, and it was taken standing as the tables were cleared, and it was considered medicine. Physicians of the age taught that the stomach was a kind of cauldron, and that a seal of hot spices and sugar closed it properly over a great meal, and so the most indulgent moment of the entire feast, sugar-coated spices and sweet wine on top of 3 courses, was understood by everyone present as an act of health. People have never needed much help believing that the delicious thing is also the wise thing. Some things don't change. And then, at last, at very long last, comes the part of a feast day that no chronicle bothers to describe, and I refuse to skip because you've earned it, and so has what? The kitchen eats. It happens in waves, in corners, in the slackening water between the feast's tides. There is a mountain of food in this castle tonight that will never see the hall. The trimmings, the seconds, the dishes cooked as spares against disaster and not needed. The coffin walls, the practice batches, the birds that roasted uneven, the frumenti that caught slightly on the pot bottom and tastes. Whisper it. Better that way. Kitchen lore, old as fire, says the kitchen feeds itself from the overflow, and tonight the overflow is a kingdom. You eat standing at the end of your own table, and you eat like what you are, which is a 14-year-old boy who has slept 4 hours in 2 days and worked like a dray horse. A slab of ox, roasted by your own numb arm on that spit, with cameline sauce you pounded yourself and you taste the whole day inside it. The cinnamon, the vinegar, the bread you toasted for the crumbs. Your own shoulder's ache is somehow in that sauce, and a wedge of raised pie, dense as a fist with spiced pork and dried fruit, and a fritter someone tosses you underhand across the table, too hot to hold, so you eat it in the air in bites, juggling it, apple scalding and sugar gritting on your split knuckles when you lick them, and small ale, cool from the cellar, going down your throat in one long swallow that you feel travel the whole way. Around you, the same everywhere. Men and boys leaning against tables and walls, jaws working, eyes half shut. The roar of the day dropped to a crackle. Someone starting the fat fire story already, hands widening, flames rising in the telling. The Yorkshire fish cook eats an entire eel pie alone, methodically with the solemnity of a man at mass. Master Gervais and his London men have wine, real wine, sent down from the steward with the steward's compliments, which is the upstairs world's way of saying the Earl's 8 words reach the right ears, and Gervais pours a cup and carries it across the whole kitchen and sets it in front of Master Aldous, and the 2 masters, who've been circling each other with immaculate courtesy for a week like 2 cats in one barn, drink together without a word, and something in the room settles that you didn't know was unsettled. Above, the hall has turned from feast to revel. You hear it through the vault all evening as you work the closing chores, and the sound changes hour by hour like weather. The sea noise of talk, then music with a beat in it, then the drumming of the dancing itself 400 feet finding the same moment over and over, dust probably sifting from the hall beams, and later laughter in waves, and later still singing, the ragged, glorious singing of people who have been drinking wedding wine since noon. Tonight the bride and groom will be put to bed by a laughing crowd, with a blessing said over the bed itself, because even that is public, even that is witnessed, a marriage in this world being far too important to be left to the married. And you will hear the roar when they're carried up, even from down here. Everyone in the castle will hear it. That's the point of it. Somewhere past midnight, Master Aldous finds you scouring the last mortar with sand and a straw whisk, your fingertips long past feeling, and he stands looking at the ranked and gleaming coppers, the swept hearths, the banked fires, breathing slow under their ash blankets like tired animals, and he says, "Half the town believes a feast ends when the singing starts." He takes the whisk out of your hand. "Go to your bed, Wat. Friday needs you at Lord's. The fish don't dress themselves." And you go, along the warm passage, past the pastry house where one candle still burns because Gervais is checking tomorrow's subtlety one last time, a sugar ship this time, sails and all, for the fish day, and you lie down on your pallet in your clothes with the wall warm at your back, and above you, muffled through 10 feet of stone, the castle is still dancing. Your last thought before sleep takes you is about the trenchers, all those slices of bread upstairs soaked in swan and saffron and the richest gravies in England, piling up now in the arms baskets in the dark of the buttery, and the old woman with 4 teeth sitting against the gatehouse wall, and how tomorrow her dinner will taste of an earl's dinner, and how she knew it would 3 days before it happened. Good pickings coming, kitchen boy. The whole world is one table, it turns out. It's just very, very long, and it runs from the dais to the gate, and everyone on it is fed in order. You're asleep before you decide how you feel about that. Friday arrives 4 hours later with a bell and a bucket of cold water for your face, and Friday's a different kind of hard. Because here is the medieval fish day, and you should understand how enormous a fact it was, because it shaped this whole civilization's food more than almost anything else. The church forbade meat and animal milk and eggs on Fridays, on Saturdays in many houses, on the eves of great feasts and through the whole 40 days of Lent. Add it up, and it comes to something like a third of the year, more in strict houses. A third of the year for everyone from the king to the ploughman, the entire economy of eating tilted toward water. It's why England is stitched with fish ponds, why monasteries were engineering marvels of eel management, why salt herring moved across this world in quantities that beg a belief, why a port town could grow fat on cod alone, And it's why a wedding feast that runs into a Friday is not an inconvenience but an opportunity. Because feeding 400 people magnificently without meat, milk, or eggs is the hardest examination a kitchen can sit, and your lord has chosen to sit it in public, in front of an earl, on purpose. Anyone can be splendid with an ox. Splendour out of fish and almonds. That's mastery, and everyone at that high table will know exactly what they're being shown. So the almonds, the blessed almonds, the almonds you walked into town for, and now you finally see what they were always for. From lords to mid-morning, the mortar line does nothing else. Blanch, skin, pound, and then the part you hadn't seen. The pounded almonds go into linen bags and hot water goes over them, and you wring. You wring almond milk out of cloth bags with your 2 hands, twisting until your forearms shake, and it runs out white and rich and faintly sweet over your wrists. Gallons of it, buckets of it, and the smell of it is clean and mild, and after 2 days of blood and scald water it feels like absolution. Almond milk becomes everything today. It becomes the blancmange, made now with pike instead of capon, and I promise you, done right, the guests genuinely argued about which they preferred. It becomes butter, actual sculpted butter for the high table made of almonds and sugar pressed in moulds, butter that never saw a cow. It becomes the cream sauces, the potages, the space of half the day. There were even, at the grandest tables of this age, fast-day illusions that verge on wizardry. Eggs made for Lent with the yolk of one thing and the white of another, roast meats counterfeited out of fish, dishes built entirely to let the eye sin while the soul stayed clean. The medieval fast bred the medieval trick, and the kitchen loved the trick because the trick is where the artist lives. And the fish itself, the sheer parade of it. The pike, tyrant of the stew ponds, long as your arm, dressed by the Yorkshireman with 4 movements of a knife. The eels, your old enemies, gone quiet at last in their galantine dark as churchwood. Salmon, lampreys baked in syrupy spiced blood-thick sauce in their coffins, the delicacy of kings. Whole conger, salt cod brought back to life through 3 days of changed water. Herring done 10 ways because there is always herring. Herring is the wheat of the sea. And at the centre of the day, the porpoise, carved and roasted and served with frumenti exactly as venison would be. The fish day's answer to the stag. And when it goes up the stair, on 2 chargers, needing 4 boys, the smell of it is like nothing else in your life. Sea and roast and strangeness. And the hall receives it the way it received the swan. You can hear the difference between polite applause and real astonishment through a stone floor by now. You've become a scholar of that sound. Mid-afternoon, between the courses, comes the almsgiving, and Master Aldous sends you to help carry, and so you finally see the other end of the table. The alms go out at the gate. The trenchers, the broken meats from yesterday, whole loaves, the coffin walls, gallons of yesterday's pottage kept warm, all of it carried out in baskets under the eye of the almoner, a priest with a ledger, because even charities are counted here. Charity above all is accounted. It is your Lord's soul being banked. And the poor of the town are waiting. They have been waiting since dawn, and there are so many more of them than you imagined, standing in the cold in their patched russet and their bare legs. Old men, widows, children with the particular stillness of children who have learned that food comes to the patient, and they come forward in order, without crowding, because the almoner knows every face and disorder means going home empty, and into each pair of hands goes bread that soaked yesterday under swan. The old woman with 4 teeth is near the front. Of course she is. She takes her loaf and her trencher, and she looks the trencher over front and back like a woman reading a letter, and then she looks up and finds you. Out of all the boys she finds you, and grins that great four-toothed grin and says, "Saffron, this one's had. Told you, kitchen boy. Good pickings." And she tucks it inside her cloak like treasure, because it is treasure, and goes. You stand there at the gate a moment longer than your errand needs. Behind you, up the hill of the ward, through walls, the faint music of the second sitting. In front of you, the line of the poor shuffling forward in the wind, bread moving from one world to the other through your hands. 14 years old is not too young to feel the size of that, even without the words for it. You don't have the words. You just have the wind and the weight of the empty basket and the strange full ache in the chest that you'll learn over a lifetime arrives whenever you see how things actually fit together. Then a voice from the gatehouse bawls your name because the hall wants wafers and the ache has to wait. The ache always has to wait, and you run. You run. And it occurs to you, pounding up the ward with the wind in your teeth, that you know this castle now the way you know your own hands. 5 years ago it swallowed you. Now you could cross it blind. Kitchen to gate, gate to buttery, buttery to stair. The whole stone machine of it, and you are one of its moving parts, small and necessary, like a pin in a lock. The feast ends at dusk with the voidee, the standing cup, the scatter of comfits, and the great slow dissolving of 400 people into the evening. And when the last dish comes down the stair, empty, and the last empty is scoured, and the fires are banked for the first true night's sleep in 3 days, Master Aldous gathers the whole kitchen, all of it, masters and boys and hired hands, in the orange dark, and gives the closest thing to a speech you will ever hear from him. It is 11 words long. It was well done, all of it, by all of you. That's the whole speech. In this kitchen it lands like a coronation. On Sunday, 2 days after, when the last guests' baggage trains have creaked out of the gate and the castle has gone strangely, ringingly quiet, the way a bell goes quiet, still humming with what struck it, you climb the tower. You're allowed to, more or less, on a Sunday afternoon if you know which watchman is on and which stair he doesn't watch, and every boy in the castle knows both. 140 steps spiral, your legs complaining in a friendly way now, the ordinary complaint of a body that has been through something and knows it survived. And then the door at the top, and the wind takes your hair, and the whole world lies down flat in front of you. The town below, smoke rising from its chimneys straight up in the still cold air, and you can pick out Simon the Grocer's street, and the church, and the market cross. The river, pewter-coloured, sliding away between willows, and on it, white flecks. The swans, the ones still living, the ones whose sisters wore crowns on Thursday, riding the current like nothing in the world had happened, because for them nothing had. The stew ponds glinting quietly growing next year's pike, the fields in their long medieval strips, brown and green and fallow, running to the woods, and in the woods deer, and beyond the woods the road, going where roads go. And you stand there with your forearms on the cold stone, getting your breath, and you can see it now. That's the thing about height. It doesn't show you anything new. It shows you how the things you knew connect. Every single piece of the feast is lying in front of you in the landscape. The oxen came from those fields, the sheep from that hill, the eels and the pike from those ponds, the swans from that river, the venison from those woods, the flour from that mill. You can see the mill wheel turning from here, The ale from the water of that spring, the wax from hives behind that orchard wall. The wedding feast wasn't conjured, it was the landscape itself, gathered up and cooked, an entire countryside compressed for 3 days into one hall, and then dissolved again into 400 bodies and a line of the poor at the gate. Only the spices came from beyond the horizon, the pepper, the ginger, the saffron, the cinnamon, threads of the far world drawn all the way to this hilltop through Venice and London and Simon's narrow shop, and that was exactly why they were worth their weight in silver. Because everything else here is the view, and the spices are the proof that your Lord's reach goes past the edge of it. You think about the bride, gone off yesterday to her new life with her 40 horses. You never heard her voice. You saw her for half a second, in blue, being brave. Her wedding will be the story this county tells for a generation. The swan, the fire-breathing peacock, the sugar bridge, and she will be at the centre of every telling. And she ate almost nothing, and no one will ever tell it that way. And you think about the Earl's 8 words, already legend in the kitchen, already improved in the retelling. North of London it's become in some mouths, in all of England in one ambitious version. And you think about the boy with the bandaged hands, who was back at his fire yesterday, turning the spit for the ordinary Sunday dinner. 30 people. A normal day? Nothing. After this week, nothing at all. The wind smells of cold and wood smoke, and, faintly, from the kitchen chimneys below and behind you, of the mutton broth for supper. Your supper. Ordinary supper. Tomorrow the kitchen goes back to its old size, its old rhythm, the hired hands paid off, the London men gone home with their fees, and their moulds, and their fur-trimmed hood, and there will be days this winter, dark, ordinary days of peas pottage and salt herring, when the whole thing will feel like something you dreamed. Except your hands will know better. The fishhook scar has company now. A new pale line across the left palm from a charger's hot rim, and the split knuckles are knitting, and the pepper burn is gone, and somewhere in the meat of your right shoulder there is a memory of a sugar bridge that will wake up every so often for the rest of your life whenever you carry anything heavy and precious and level. And here's what else you carry down those 140 steps, though it will take you years to say it plainly. You went up the tower a kitchen boy who had survived a great feast. You come down knowing what a feast is. It's not the food. It was never the food. It's a whole world agreeing for 3 days to show itself to itself. The Lord's reach, the church's calendar, the Earl's favour, the bride's dowry, the craftsman's pride, the poor's patience, the countryside's yield, all of it plated and sauced and carried up a stair by boys whose names nobody wrote down, and eaten in order from the dais to the gate. Everyone fed the exact portion of glory their place allowed. You were the wire in the swan's neck. You were the stone in the arch, and the arch held. The years go by the way years do, seed time and harvest, Lent and Easter, fast and feast, the great wheel of the eating year rolling round and round, and you rise with it. Undercook, then second at the sauces when the old sauce cook's wrists finally give out, and he shouts 30 years of feel and smell into you in his last 2 seasons the way a man bails a sinking boat, and some of it you catch. You keep a boy off the mortars when his hands split too deep, remembering. You teach the scalding count to children who weren't born when you learned it, one paternoster said fast. You stand where Master Aldous stood, eventually, not in this castle, but in a smaller one 2 valleys over, your own kitchen, your own keys, one of them to a spice chest. And the first time a wedding comes to that house, A modest wedding. 40 guests, 1 swan. You find yourself walking the kitchen the night before, touching nothing, looking at everything, and you hear your own voice say to a frightened boy on the morning of it, "You walk steady, you don't stop on the stair." And the boy nods the way you nodded, understanding nothing yet, about to understand everything. Master Aldous dies an old man, they tell you, in his bed in winter, which for a cook of his era is a triumph roughly equal to sainthood, and the last thing he is known to have said, inspecting the broth they brought him, is that it wanted salt. You believe every word of it. And the sugar bridge? Eaten, in the end. That's the fate of Sateltes, the beautiful ones most of all. Broken up after the feast, shared out in fragments, a tower here, a swan there, sugar being far too precious to stand as sculpture forever, and somewhere in that county, for 50 or 60 years afterward, there were old men and women who could say, and did say, at every wedding they ever attended for the rest of their lives, that they had once eaten a piece of a bridge with a gilded king and queen upon it, and that nothing since had ever tasted quite like it. Nothing ever does. That's what memory is for. But before we let the fires burn down for the night, come away from the castle for a little while, because there's a question hanging over everything you've just lived through, and it's the question most people actually mean when they ask what food was served at medieval weddings. Not the earls, not the swans. What about everyone else? What did a wedding taste like for the other 95 people out of every 100? The people who would never in their lives stand within smelling distance of a peacock. So come down the hill. Come along the road, past the mill, to the village, on a morning in early autumn, because that's when village weddings cluster, after the harvest is in and before the winter slaughter, the one brief season of the peasant year when there is both food and time. A young man named John is marrying a young woman named Alice, and every wedding in this village has been a John marrying an Alice for as long as anyone can remember, and the whole parish is coming, because a village wedding belongs to the village. There are no invitations, there is only everyone. And the first thing to understand is that Alice's wedding feast has been growing quietly for months, the way a castle feast grows in 3 roaring days. Her mother has been holding back eggs since midsummer. A cheese has been waiting in the loft, turned and turned. The good cheese, the one the family didn't eat on purpose 60 times. Her father has been fattening a pig with a betrayed innocence about its future, and 2 of his neighbours have promised hens, and the promise is real, because it will be called in again when their own daughters marry. This village keeps books that were never written down, favours and hens and days of labour, all remembered to the last feather for generations. A peasant wedding feast is not bought. It is assembled out of a whole community's small margins, the way a barn is raised. The bread comes first, always the bread, and for a wedding it is wheat. Understand what that means. This family eats maslin all year. Mix wheat and rye, dense and grey-brown, or barley bread in the hungry stretches, and white wheaten bread is what the manor eats, what the castle eats, and on her wedding day Alice will eat bread as white as the bride at the top of the hill ate, or nearly, and everyone at the board will notice, because everyone at the board can read bread the way the Earl reads Sateltes. In this world you always know exactly what you are eating relative to what you could be eating. The loaf is a ladder, and today the whole village climbs it a rung, then the pig, killed the day before by John's uncle, who's the man in the village who kills pigs. Every village has one, scalded and scraped in the yard in a scene you'd find very familiar by now. Just smaller and nothing wasted. Nothing. the puddings made from the blood that same evening by lamplight, the trotters into the pot, the fat rendered down, and the great joints roasted on a spit before the biggest hearth in the village, which happens to be the one at the alehouse, whose keeper donates the fire in exchange for the custom, which is going to be considerable. There is a goose, because it's the goose season, Michaelmas, when the geese are fat off the harvest stubble, and they are the promised hens, boiled with leeks and herbs until they surrender, and there is a pottage. Of course there is a pottage. There is always a pottage. But this one is thick with real meat and marrow bones and thickened. Listen to this. Thickened with a handful of actual almonds and a pennyworth of pepper and saffron. 1 pennyworth, bought by Alice's father from Simon the grocer's stall on market day, the smallest twist of paper you ever saw, carried home in his fist like a relic. And that twist of paper is the castle feast in miniature, the far world's flavour reaching 1 rung down the ladder, 1 wedding's worth, and when the pottage goes round and the neighbours taste pepper, they will look at Alice's father, and he will look back at them, and not 1 word will be said, and everything will be understood. There are eggs in everything now, all those hoarded summer eggs spent in 1 glorious afternoon, in the custards, in the little cakes made with the white flour and precious sugar and studded with currants. There is the cheese, cut at last. There are apples and plums because it's autumn and the trees are giving, and pears roasted in the embers. There is honey where the castle adds sugar, and there is 1 dish that is pure celebration, made only for weddings and churchings and Christmas. A great sweet custard tart, coloured yellow with the saffron threads left over from the pottage, carried to the board with 2 hands and a certain walk. And if you think a peasant tart carried with ceremony is nothing like a sugar bridge with trumpets, you're wrong. It is exactly like it. It is the same human gesture at a different scale. Look what we have. Look what we can do. Taste how glad we are. And the ale. Oh, the ale! This is the engine of the whole day, and it even has a name. The bride ale. Alice's mother and her neighbours have been brewing for 2 weeks. Strong ale, wedding ale, far stronger than the daily small ale. And here's the beautiful machinery of it. The ale is sold. At the wedding. To the guests. Everyone comes, everyone drinks, everyone pays what they can into the pot for the young couple, and the taking set John and Alice up in their new life. A cow, perhaps, or the rent, or the bed. The party is the wedding present. The word did such good service that it outlived the custom, walked out of the alehouse and into the language, and got attached to the whole event and then to other events, until your world uses it without a flicker of memory for any large celebration at all. Bridal, the bride's ale. You've been saying a cup of medieval wedding beer your entire life. The feast is eaten outdoors if the weather holds, on boards and trestles in the churchyard or the toft. Everyone in their church best. The piper paid in dinner, the dancing on the grass going until the light goes, children asleep under the tables like dropped cloaks, the old people telling every previous wedding, and the food, and this is the thing, the food is what they will tell. 60 years from now, an old woman who is at this moment a girl licking custard from her fingers will say to her granddaughter, at that girl's own wedding, that at John and Alice's bride ale there was pepper in the pottage, and the bread was white as a lady's hand, and she will not be believed quite, and she will not care quite, because she was there, and it was true, and it tasted like the whole world opening for one afternoon. Castle or village, that's what a medieval wedding served in the end. Not swans, not pork, It served the same single dish at every table in Christendom, from the Earl's dais to the churchyard grass. The taste, once or twice in a lifetime, of more than enough. Everything else was garnish, and now the fires really are burning down, so let's go back one last time to where we started, to the boy, because he's earned his ending and so have you. It's late on the night after the feast, the Friday night, the first night in 3 that the kitchen sleeps. What lies on his pallet in the passage? The wool warm at his back where the great oven cools behind the stone, breathing its heat out slowly, all night, like a tide going out. Around him the others, the trough boy, the new spit boy, the boy who fell on the stair and was whole, all of them down and gone already, breathing in the dark. That soft, ragged chorus of worn-out children sleeping the sleep of the genuinely finished. His body is a map of the weak, the shoulders deep and dull, the forearms bright and specific, every mortar remembered separately, the fingertips humming, the new line across the left palm tight when he curls his hand, the feet throbbing gently down at the end of him like something moored. None of it hurts exactly, not any more. It's more like his whole body is full of the weak the way a cup is full right to the brim, and sleep is the only place with room to pour it. He can smell the kitchen through the wall. He will always be able to smell the kitchen through any wall for the rest of his life. Banked fire, old smoke, fat gone cold in the pans, the ghost of almonds. Above it, faintly, lavender from the tabard folded under his head. The clean tabard, which nobody asked him to give back, and which he is not going to mention. The castle above him is quiet in the way a huge thing is quiet, full of small sounds, a door somewhere, the watch changing on the wall, 2 voices, footsteps parting, wind working at a shutter, patient as water, down in the yard a dog dreaming, one muffled woof and then nothing. The river of noise that ran through this place for 3 days has sunk back into the ground, and what's left is just the building itself, settling, ticking, holding everyone. He thinks about the sugar bridge, the way the little swans trembled on their river with his own heartbeat. He carried that. His hands carried that, these hands, right here, folded under his cheek, 25 paces, level the whole way. He thinks about the Earl's 8 words and lets himself, just this once in the dark where it costs nothing, put himself into the sentence. I have not seen its like. Well, he helped make its like, a very small part of its like, the corner of a board, the saving of the almonds, a stone in the arch held. His eyes are closed now. They closed a while ago and he didn't notice. Tomorrow there will be pottage to start and pans to scour and the whole ordinary machine of an ordinary Saturday. Tomorrow the hired hands go home and the kitchen shrinks back to its own true size. Tomorrow his shoulders will have opinions about the mortars, but that's tomorrow. Right now there is only this, the warm wall, the dark, the breathing of the others, the slow tide of the oven going out. He is warm enough. He is fed enough, fed better this week than he may ever be fed again. He is safe enough, behind more stone than an army could argue with. That's more than most people in his whole world have tonight. That's enough. The sounds of the castle grow fainter, or maybe he's just listening less. The boundary starts to soften, the way it does, the way it's doing for you right now, when the body has finally been given permission and takes it. Somewhere above him, in the dark of the great hall, the trestles are stacked and the rushes lie quiet, still holding a ghost of trumpets. Somewhere in the cellar the wine sleeps in its barrels. Somewhere on the river real swans ride the black water with their heads under their wings. Somewhere down in the town, an old woman with 4 teeth sleeps with half a saffron trencher, wrapped safe in a cloth for mourning, and centuries will pass. The castle he sleeps in will soften into ruin, or into a monument with a gift shop, or into nothing but a name on a hill. The fish days will fade. The swans will be left on their rivers. The spices that were locked behind 2 keys will sit in your cupboard in little jars worth pennies, and you will forget them at the back of the shelf. But people will still gather when 2 of their own join hands, still put everything they have onto one table for one day, still argue about the menu, still hoard the good thing for the occasion, still carry the special dish in with 2 hands and a certain walk, still feed the crowd in order and remember, decades on, exactly what was served, long after they've forgotten the weather and the words. Some things don't change. The wedding feast doesn't change. Not really. Not the part that matters, the part that was never the food. And the need for rest at the end of the long work, the pallet by the warm wall when everything is finally done, that doesn't change either. So let it come. Let sleep take you the way it took Watt in the passage by the oven, 5.5 centuries ago, with the wall warm at his back and the whole feast folded away inside him. Let the great hall go dark. Let the fires sink to their embers, and the embers to their ash, and the ash to its long quiet. Let the noise of the day fall away behind you, dish by dish, step by step down the stair. Let your hands uncurl. They've carried enough. Let your thoughts slow and soften and finally stop. You've earned this rest. You've been at the feast all day, whatever your feast was, carrying your own boards up your own stairs, keeping your own bridges level. The arch held. It always holds a little longer than you fear it will. Take your rest now. Take it the way it's offered, warm and unearned and free, the best dish of the whole day, served last to everyone, above the salt and below it. No order, no rank, the one table where every seat is the high table, and dream of whatever dreams may come. Good night.